Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So today, inshallah, we're going to do a summary of Tawheed. Does one of you guys mind filling this up with water for me? So this is the fifth topic. There's 7 in total. So there's today, and then there's 2 more. We'll run next week, inshallah, definitely, and then we'll run the week after. So that will take us to, January 11th or something like that. We'll be done, inshallah. 10th, so that's when we'll be done. And then, inshallah, the week afterwards, with Ta'ala Muhammad, we'll start doing a little bit of a different, it'll be a little bit of a change of gears, basically, just kind of talking about different things within this mentorship program. And the reason, and again, is to cover what we were hoping to cover, inshallah, for those who are going to attend with us the whole series. And making sure that there's some didactical, we do a little bit of teaching and maybe focusing on concepts and values and principles and whatnot. And then we talk a little bit about skill set building, habit building, skill sets and stuff like that. And then we kind of turn back around again and do some discussions on more contemporary problems or issues that people face. So just to kind of keep it, inshallah, interesting and maybe a little bit more, for there to be a bit of diversity and variety in it. You guys are an older group. Obviously today it's Boxing Day or whatever, after Boxing Day today. So I'm not assuming, I knew a lot of people weren't going to show up, but I still want to do this summary because these are summaries, honestly. They're not, I'm not actually, each of these topics took 2 to 3 sessions each. And I'm basically condensing them to one session just as a revision or a summary for people who did not attend at some point or missed out or want to just get it, have their memory refreshed on the topics. So this is the 5th one. We've talked about the fundamental principle of Iqra. We've talked about activism and indifference. We've talked about stewardship and service. We've talked about jihad. And then today is the 5th topic, and then we have 2 more. And these are the topics that I think are extremely important that every Muslim should know really, really well. Should know like back of their hands. They should be very comfortable with. They should be able to explain and debate and discuss and argue and most importantly practice. And they should see how everything in Islam, basically one way or the other, is connected to these 7 basic topics. And today, if you've attended this before, then obviously you've been through the session, so you know what the answer is. But this is not just a corny question that doesn't have substance. This is actually true. If you had to describe Islam in one word, this is the word that you're going to describe it with. So it's not just as in. When I ask it and I'm looking for answers, it's not like you're wrong. If you had to break Islam down to one thing, this is what it has to be. You cannot break Islam down to something different. You can't call it something else. This is the main idea that Islam came to teach the Arabs and teach people or get people to revert back into the. You hear when they say they don't like us calling converts anymore for some reason. So I can't call it convert anymore for whatever. Someone has to correct me and say it's a revert. All right, fine, whatever. But the reason where this came from is the idea that this topic, this concept here, is the origin. This is what Adam alayhi salam believed in. This is what he was taught. Obviously, it's not even belief. It was very clear to Adam alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him, so he understood this idea, and then he passed it down. But then people found that it's not lucrative. This concept here doesn't make money, and it forces you to live life in a certain way, where you have to be a bit more selfless and you have to work for the service of others a bit more. And it takes away a lot of the options for corruption that exists in the world. And people who are in charge and people who like control and people, they don't like it. So they end up basically moving things around a little bit, moving some pieces around to kind of mess with the actual concept. So if you had to describe Islam with one word, what would it be? It's going to be Tawheed. It's going to be monotheism. You're going to say Tawheed. That's what the Prophet ﷺ came. That's what he argued down to the last minute, down to the bone. It was just Tawheed. If you lose everything else, then you have to have Tawheed because Tawheed will bring everything else. It's like if we're shaving off pieces of Islam for you, what is that one thing that is the most important concept of all? And if you do have it, even if you've lost everything else, if you hold on to it and you're in a position where you're not being persecuted anymore, then you can this one thing will regenerate everything else. Tawheed will bring back to life every aspect of Islamic law and Islamic faith and Islamic practice if it stays intact. Are you understanding what I'm trying to explain? I like to look at Tawheed as the stem cells within the human body. I don't know if it's a probably silly example. But the idea is that Tawheed is so powerful that even if everything else is chopped off, if you still have it, it will rebuild everything. It'll keep. But if you lose it, nothing works. Everything comes crashing down. Literally, if you lose Tawheed, it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before Islam is completely removed from the consciousness of people and removed from practice. And what's really important is so all scholars will, when most people will say Tawheed. All scholars will say Tawheed, by the way. Some people may not. May say submission, may say surrender, may say peace. They'll say, but no, it's Tawheed, 100%. And all scholars will say that. The question that we have, I'm not sure if I have the question right up front. I'll come back to these in a moment. So why is it, though? Why is it the most important part of Islam? Why? Right? Do you feel it to be? And if you don't, well, why don't you? And is it, or is it just for show, or does it actually have substance to it? Like, does Tawheed actually, is it actually that important? Or, because I always asked that question when I was a kid, like, why is this the most important thing? Why? Like, I don't understand. And it took me a while for me to kind of pick up on all the actual reasons. This is the most valuable phrase that exists in the universe, and this is what will, and if everything fails, if all your bargains don't work, Yawm al-Qiyamah, this one, you can always hope for this. You can always, that last attempt to make it, you can just La ilaha illallah, hopefully, because it works. Because nothing is heavier than the Tawheed of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing comes even remotely close to La ilaha illallah. Here's some examples. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, all these are hadith that are authentic, heavily authentic, so high up there in the chains of narrations. Bukhari says, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam tells us, لن يوافي عبد يوم القيامة يقول لا إله إلا الله يبتغي به وجه الله إلا حرم الله عليه النار. That no servant will come on the day of judgment with the phrase of La ilaha illallah. They've said it and they actually wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's satisfaction and pleasure with it, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save them from the hellfire. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, also narrated by Abu Dawood, and also authentic, Man kana akhiru kalamihi La ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah. If the last thing that comes out of your mouth before you pass away is La ilaha illallah, you're almost guaranteed Jannah. That's why when people are passing away, you find their families standing around them, hoping that they can do talqeen of La ilaha illallah. Just say the word. So if you want to make sure you say it before you die, then you say it a lot during your life. You'll only say at the time you die what you said a lot when you were living. Whatever is really inside your mind, inside your heart, basically the mix of the two, is what's going to be produced as you pass away. Actually, it's not just when you're passing away. It's when we're in a position where the adrenaline level is high, or you're very stressed out or scared. That's when a lot of what's inside kind of jumps out. Like the way people behave in very, very difficult situations tells a lot about who they are. And as a person, you should be the one who's critical about yourself regarding that. Like you should be watching yourself. When you're in really bad situations, how do you behave? Right? And then you have to be critical of yourself. Is that how I should behave? Are my thoughts the right thoughts when I'm under a lot of stress and pressure? Or do I have the wrong thoughts? Am I saying the right things or the wrong things? Do I have the right feelings or the wrong feelings? And do I make the right decisions or the wrong decisions? So that's really what you have to kind of watch. Because whatever you do when you're under a lot of stress in life, when you're just living, very similarly, as you pass away, you'll do the same thing. I see this all the time. I see this every day, every single day. I see it every day. It's when people are told to their face that they have only a very short period of time left, is when that's like the most stressful moment of a human being's life. Like I have to be there delivering the news that will make this the worst day of this person's life, hands down. Like there's no day worse than this except the day that they actually die. Then the day that I have to sit there and tell them, you have 6 months. Best case scenario, maybe 8 if everything works out. So you need to start talking about what you want to do. You have to get your financial assets in order. You have to kind of work things out. You have to figure out what you're going to do in the future because it's going to be over. And a lot comes out at that moment, right? A lot. And people respond to that very differently. Very differently. Well, the range is very interesting. Like, obviously, I hope inshallah none of you see that. None of you have to go through, or your loved ones. But it's a very intriguing moment when you watch people kind of go through that, because it brings out a lot of who they are. So, man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah. If the last thing you say is la ilaha illallah, you make it to Jannah. It's not easy. It's not easy to make sure that that's the last word. That's what you held, because that means la ilaha illallah is what you held on to all your life. That was the main theme of your existence. Everything had value in your life, but La ilaha illallah by far was the most valuable thing that you ever had. And you never saw anything to be even remotely close to it. So at the moment of true difficulty, you will hold on, you will plunge towards that which you really think or feel was powerful. The human being, when they're really, really weak, at that moment of complete weakness, you'll plunge towards whatever inside your subconsciousness you thought was strong and powerful. So if you truly believe in La ilaha illallah, that's what you'll run to. And if you don't, then you may end up going saying something else or going in some other direction. So just be very careful. When Abu Talib, as Imam Bukhari narrates us, when Abu Talib was passing away, the Prophet ﷺ would come to him and say, قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ كَلِمَةٌ أُحَاجُّ لَكَ بِهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. Just say La ilaha illallah. Just give me that. Just say that, I'll fight for you. I'll fight for you Yawm al-Qiyamah. I will argue on your behalf. If you just say La ilaha illallah for me. That's how powerful it is just to say it. Just say it and I'll take care of the rest. You just say it. Just give me that. Now, we don't know if he ever said it or not, but it's very difficult. Most likely he didn't, but still. The Prophet ﷺ did that. Umar ibn Khattab tells us, the Prophet ﷺ says, إني لأعلم كلمة لا يقولها عبد حقا من قلبه فيموت على ذلك إلا حرم على النار لا إله إلا الله. I know a word that if someone says sincerely, truthfully, if they say it, then they will not be punished in the hellfire, which is La ilaha illallah. I'm just building it up for you. So I'm just trying to convince you that this is, when I tell you this is the most important part of the deen, that this is how you would, if you summarize Islam to one word, then this is the word. I'm trying to just convince you, I'm pleading my case. So if you're like, okay, I'm convinced that La ilaha illallah and the concept of Tawheed is most important, that'll just take me to my next, to the next concept which is the question. So for example, Ibn Hibban tells us that the Prophet ﷺ said that Musa said, Ya Rabbi allimni shay'an adhkuruka wa ad'uka bihi. So give me something, Ya Rabb, that I call you upon, that I praise you by. فقال, so Allah subhanahu tells him, say, Ya Musa, قل لا إله إلا الله. Say La ilaha illallah. So Musa says, كل عبادك يقولون هذا. Meaning Musa says, oh my Lord, everyone says that. Everyone, give me something specific, something very special that I say that no one else does, that makes me closer to you than everyone else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered, قال يا موسى لو أن السماوات السبع وعامرهن غيري والأرضين السبع في كفة ولا إله إلا الله في كفة مالت بهن لا إله إلا الله. He tells them, if everything that I ever created was in one scale, one hand of the scale, and in the other hand of the scale was La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah outweighs it all. So I'm telling you to say the most important thing, the most valuable thing that can be said. أكثرهم شهادة لا إله إلا الله قبل أن يحال بينكم وبينها ولقنوها موتاكم. Say a lot, La ilaha illallah, before you come to a moment where you can't say it anymore. It's not your choice. It's going to be the reflex of what's inside of you, which is when you die. وَلَقِّنُوهَا مَوْتَاكُمْ. Sit around the people who are passing away and tell them to say La ilaha illallah, because that will save them. It goes on and on. I have there's at least maybe another 15 hadith that are all authentic that I can go through that have similar messages of the importance of saying it, or the concept of La ilaha illallah. In the Quran we have it twice. In the Quran we have twice these verses repeated. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. Right? Twice in Surah An-Nisa it comes twice. Indeed, Allah does not forgive association with Him. I mean, He doesn't forgive polytheism. As long as you don't come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with shirk, then you're good. If you come with shirk, it's the only thing that He won't forgive. That's what He's saying. It's actually, this verse is very an optimistic verse, because it's saying that everything else is potentially forgivable. Everything else, we can probably find a way to forgive you and move on. Just don't come believing in more than one God. Just don't come and tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yeah, there's a bunch of you. I didn't really believe in you. Or I didn't believe in you at all. Like shirk is two things. Shirk is either associating others with God or not believing in His existence altogether. It's the same thing. It comes down to the same thing. Because basically when you don't accept the supreme deity at all, then you're basically saying that creation came from a different source, which is shirk. Whatever source you believe created things is whatever is that you're associating with God. So it's just a play with words. It doesn't make much of a difference. So this is important because the only thing that, he stated it twice, the only thing I won't forgive is shirk. I won't forgive shirk. Everything else I'm fine. So come with Tawheed. Make sure you have Tawheed. That's why we're telling you Tawheed is the most important thing. Because everything else is fixable. Any other problem we come with, I'm trying to explain all the Islamic concepts. If you come with one of those problems, there is a good chance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pardon you and forgive you. Just don't come, based on this ayah, these two verses, don't come with shirk. Don't come and not have monotheism on your belt. Don't come with the lack of Tawheed. And he says that alayhi salatu wasalam in other hadith as well. As long as you come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with no shirk, غَفَرْتُ يَا ابْنَ آدَمَ لَوْ لَقِيتَنِي بقراب الأرض خطايا ولقيتني لا تشرك بي شيئا للقيتك بقرابها مغفرة. If you come to me and you meet me with the weight of the earth of sin, but you come to me with La ilaha illallah, I'll bring you the weight of the earth of forgiveness, and I'll forgive it for you. So La ilaha illallah, it comes back again, and you'll find again many examples. So why? Why is this so important? Why? This is a very important question for you. It baffles me that Muslims don't have the answer for this right off the top of their head. I understand why in terms of the evidence. A lot of people, when I ask them this question, they just give me evidence. Why? Is because Allah said that. I understand He said that. Why is He saying this? Why is He taking out of all of the Islamic principles and telling us that this one here, out of everything else, you need to have this. You can afford not to have other things, but you can't afford not to have this one. What's the reason? Why is it so important? Is it like some selfish thing that God has? He doesn't want someone else getting in on His action? No, that's obviously not the reason, because Allah doesn't really benefit from you saying La ilaha illallah. Whether you say it or not makes no difference. La ilaha illallah is the only truth that exists in this world. It's the only truth. It's the only a certain truth that exists. If you say it, then you're just getting a lot. You're just joining the group. You're just joining everything else that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created that praises His name and accepts La ilaha illallah. If you don't, then you're basically running on your own, and you're going to have to deal with that on the Day of Judgment. La ilaha illallah is the only certainty that exists. You say it, it allows you it gives you access to something. You're offered that ability to prove that you actually believe it. But it doesn't make a difference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you say it or not. Obviously it pleases Him, but you're not adding anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by saying it or not. But why is it so important? Or is it just that He just wants? He's like, don't come to me with shirk, or I don't. But it has no implication. Like, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make you a better person in any form or manner. That's actually a problem. I found people struggled with this concept because of that. Like, well, if that's the only reason, it doesn't really seem like they don't see the majesty in it. They don't see the beauty in it. They don't see the profoundness in it, because they're wondering, well, why does He care so much about this? It's not about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's actually about us. Tawheed is for us, it's not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning the benefit of it is ours. It's not, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't really benefit from any of it, and it doesn't make a difference really what we say or what we don't say. Does Tawheed have any practical applications? Or is it strictly an article of belief? Is it just a thing that you think? Is it just a thing that you believe? Or does it have some practice attached to it? Say La ilaha illallah, what does that mean? What does that do to you? Before we talk about salah and siyam and zakah and hajj, and before we talk about, for example, iqra and activism and qiyam and ubudiyya and istikhlaf and jihad, before we talk about all that stuff, does la ilaha illallah, does tawheed on its own, just believing that there is no God but Allah, does that have an effect on you? Or is it just a belief? Either believe it or you don't. And it kind of makes me wonder, if it, really, to make it to Jannah, I just have to think something? That's it? I just have to say, because honestly, if you can't speak, then, because it's not just saying the word, La ilaha illallah. Some people can't say. Some people they're mute, they can't speak, or they don't have tongues in their mouths, or whatever. They have some deficit, they can't speak. So it's really just the belief, right? So if it's just the belief, I just have to think something, as long as I believe that there's one God, regardless of what I do. Is that easy? That's pretty easy. That doesn't really mean, because He's saying He'll most likely forget everything else. Or is there some application for La ilaha illallah? I'm trying to, I'm basically leading you with these questions, so obviously there's going to be something to it. It doesn't make any sense. There's no logic. It's not in keeping with the rest of the deen. For the most important aspect of the whole deen, to be something that has no application, no practical application at all in life, that's not in keeping with the rest of the deen, actually it makes everything else that we've been learning almost futile. It makes it wasting your time. Because all you have to do is say, La ilaha illallah. You said it, La ilaha, good. Just keep on saying it. And when you die, just make sure you say it too. And then whatever you do, you do. It doesn't matter. There'll be forgiveness. And there's, basically, I'm out of a job. This is not a job. This is not working. It's not beneficial to you. But that's not the case, obviously. It's not the case. La ilaha illallah does have application. Oh my gosh, that's the whole point of it. That's why it's so important. It's because it definitely has a lot of application in how you're going to live your life. The practicality of it is what we need to learn today. And shouldn't this answer be extremely obvious to all Muslims? I feel like it probably should. It kind of bothers me that it's not. It bothered me when I was a kid for a long time that it wasn't, because I'd ask the question and then I get really simple, superficial answers that did not fulfill my curiosity at all. I would just get the answers of what the Quran said this or the Prophet ﷺ said that. I'm like, I understand that. Like, I'm not actually asking about that. I totally agree. I'm saying why. Why is it so important? It's like when you're saying, yeah, I understand eating khanzir is haram, but just can you explain maybe why? What's the idea? We can get with our, with observation and analysis and thought, we can figure out a couple of reasons for why something is halal or is haram or is prohibited or is, recommended or is commanded or is obligatory. We can figure out a couple of reasons for stuff, and we can't figure out maybe all of the reasons, but for this is a big deal. This is not an issue of fiqh, for example. Like we talk about dogs, why can't we do it? I may not be able to answer to you all those questions you have about like why. It's an issue of fiqh. You don't have to. You don't have to get an answer out of me. Like I don't owe you one, honestly. Like I don't have to give you an answer. And that shouldn't be a reason for you to accept Islam or not accept Islam. Like when people come to me and say, well, my problem with Islam is that, I can't, it doesn't allow me to eat this or drink that. That's idiotic. It's not a reason for you to accept the faith or not accept the faith. You don't go to you don't go to like the tertiary fiqh issue. You don't go to a fiqh issue. You go to the basic creed. You go to the belief system, the principles, the values. You go to that, and then you think about it and you go through it. And if it makes sense, then the consequences should make sense as well. You don't go to the end of the stream and then argue the little details when you don't even agree with or you understand like the basic introductions or the fundamental ideas. It's very bothersome. I find it wastes a lot of my time. Like in what I do, a lot of my time is wasted arguing or explaining to people things that they don't like about the deen because they don't understand the basics of Islam to begin with. Like I have to waste a lot of time talking about this hukum, why is this ruling like this and not like that. You wouldn't have all these questions if you understood the basics, like the fundamentals, why rulings exist to begin with. What are the introductional or introductionary values that actually allow principles to exist afterwards. But then it's hard because that takes a lot of time for me to sit with somebody and say, let's go back, let's rewind and take maybe 10, 15 steps backwards and talk about, first of all, God. Do you understand that Allah, la ilaha illallah? Yes, okay, then let's move after that. And it takes a nice maybe hour of conversation just to maybe explain one little piece at the end. But this here should be clear because this is the basis of our faith. When we stand and say we are muwahhidun. Everyone else on the planet not really. Not the way we are, at least. From a creed perspective, from a theological perspective, there's really no other group on the planet who has the exact same belief in God that we do. And this is something that I've tested practically. And you can speak to Christians and to Jews and to different groups that believe in God. And you can speak specifically to the ones who believe in the oneness of God, or at least claim to believe that. And then you hear how they actually understand God and how they understand La ilaha illallah, and then you'll find there's a huge difference. There's a huge gap in between how we view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how others view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not similar. So for us, Tawheed is what we stand for. We're very passionate about it, very clear on it. It's not something that can be forgiven if you don't do it right. And it's the number one thing that exists in your faith, and you want to hold on to it till the end. So for you to say why should be very clear. It should be right there. And I've had these sessions, and when we did this session initially, I asked the question, why? And not many people were able to offer an answer that I thought was profound enough, or for themselves. And it's more important for you. Do you have a profound answer that works for you? Because I may offer you today, and you're like, no, I don't like that. I have an answer that works for me. Good, but you at least should have something that's profound, beyond the fact that that's what Allah wants. Obviously, for any of the rulings, that is the answer. Why is this halal? Because He said so. Why is this haram? Also because He said so. And honestly, beyond that, I don't have to offer you anything. I should try, I put my effort, but I don't owe it to you. As a Muslim, as a scholar, as someone who does, I'm not obligated to tell you why. And you're not entitled for a why. Sounds pretty, but that's the reality of how Islam works. Why? Because what you need to know the reasoning for is the initial stuff, not the later stuff. The initial stuff. The initial, as in why la ilaha illallah? Why is it that we don't perform these acts of haram? Why are these basic stuff? Yes, we can talk about those stuff. The belief in God and the creed and theology, the whys, they're important. But once you believe in that, once you say, yes, I totally agree, la ilaha illallah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent all the prophets, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is one of those prophets, and that this book here is His word, then I don't need to tell you why He said this was haram anymore. Because you've already believed the initial stuff. Are you understanding what I'm trying to say? If you believe in Allah, and that He sent Muhammad as a prophet, and the Quran is His word, do you have a problem with following what's in the Quran anymore? Technically speaking, logically, should you have a problem with the Quran? You shouldn't, right? So someone who comes and argues, well, the Quran says this, so why doesn't it say that? I don't owe you anything. I try. That's what I spend most of my life trying to explain to you so that you can feel at ease and maybe strengthen your own faith. but you're not owed or entitled to any of it. If you believe in La ilaha illallah, which is the article of faith, and then you believe in that he sent prophet, that he did actually communicate with human beings throughout history, and that Muhammad is one of them, and that the Quran is his divine word, then that's it. You're set. You're set moving forward. But this one here, you should probably know why, because this is a big deal. All right, I hope I've convinced you a little bit. So I'm going to do this. I'm explaining it through the red lines concept. That's how I'm going to explain this to you. The red lines concept is very simple. Every community, and this is important because it also explains human behavior. Red lines are meaning what's taboo or what's haram or what you can't do. And every society has them. Throughout history, there's always been the red lines. This is it. Here is halal, there is prohibited. You don't do that, right? And those lines cover every aspect of human life. The financial, the social, the spiritual, everything, the physical, it covers everything. Food and drink and marriage and relationships, everything has those lines. All human societies, all human civilizations have those lines. The problem with that, obviously, is that lines shift. They shift over time, they shift a lot. If it's 2022. Google 1922 when you go home. And Google what people believed, how they lived, what they practiced 100 years ago. Just 100 years ago, which is not a lot. Like, meaning there's still people around who were born somewhere around 1920 something. They're still around. They're pretty old, but they're still around. So they'll remember a very different world growing up. So what is it that happens that shifts these lines? I'm not talking about the technical advancements that we've made. Alhamdulillah, now we have more electricity, we have access to the internet, we're able to communicate better, there's better jobs, there's more food. In general, there's been a lot of better healthcare. Those are good stuff. But I'm talking about the do's and the don'ts, the things that you can and cannot do, what's considered to be ethical, what's considered not to be ethical, what's considered to be acceptable, and what's considered to be unacceptable within a society, right? Those red lines. So those lines work. So the red lines concept, in order for us to talk about it, we have to answer 3 questions for any society. Because you and I can take a cross-sectional, basically view of any civilization throughout history, anywhere you want, and we can define, here are their lines. Here's what it was okay. And then we have to answer the following 3 questions. Who drew those lines? Why were these lines drawn? And then who gives exceptions sometimes in terms of when the line can be crossed? Who's allowed? So those 3 questions have to be answered all the time. And for Muslims, that's really very important for us to know. Who drew these lines? Because just to make it simple, we'll kind of just leave this slide here for you for the first one, and you can listen to me maybe blabber away a little bit about this. So if I come to you and I draw lines for you, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't sit like this, you can't speak like that, you can't walk like that, you can't eat this. I start drawing lines for you. After a while, you're going to wonder, well, who exactly are you again? And then you kind of go do a bit of a search. You find I'm just meat and blood, and I'm just like you. There's not much of a difference. So you're like, well, I mean, maybe you have a couple of years on me, but really, I don't think you have the authority or the ability to draw these lines for me. I don't think you're the person who's capable, because at the end you're human. If a human being drew those lines for me, at a certain point, like, well, you're just human like me. After you get into your mid-20s or early 30s, you're like, yeah, everyone's just faking it to make it, right? That's all it is. So I guess you maybe had a little bit more experience, but these lines, I want to reconsider them. Like, I don't accept your authority in drawing those lines anymore. And you'd be right to do so. That's why parents, they draw lines for children. You're supposed to. As a parent, you have to. You're required to do so. But once your child grows up, depending on who drew those lines, they'll respond differently. Like, that line that you drew, the thing where I have to be home at 6 o'clock every night. What was that again? Where did that come from? Your safety. And say, yeah, I think I'm 17 now. I think I'm okay, right? And that's when you start fighting about curfews, right? Because, like, who drew this line? Who said that I have to be inside the house at 6 o'clock, right? Then you actually have that discussion. It becomes very heated because the parents, who are the authority, don't like that to be broken. But at the same time, the younger person, who is correct to actually question because this is a line that's been drawn. It's a red line. I am not allowed to be outside of my home after 6. Why? Who drew this line? You? Well, you're not God, right? You're just a person. We need to have this discussion, so you actually start caring about that, right? When you have multiple sources drawing lines versus one source drawing a line, if it's one source drawing the line, then you have very well-defined lines. If you have multiple sources, then for one issue, you'll have like 7 lines. It doesn't. I'll take the one that's as far away as possible from what I want, from what I don't want, right? So, meaning if you have multiple sources drawing lines, they're not real lines anymore. They're just like there are lines everywhere. It doesn't matter. There's too many people drawing it, and it's all chaos and confusion. So you just let it go. It doesn't work. So basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that in order for you to respect the line, the one who drew it has to be someone to you very respected, like beyond you. It can't be a human being. I'm not okay with a human being drawing a line for me without me sitting down, understanding exactly why. And if I agree, I adhere to it. And if I don't agree, then I don't adhere to it unless it becomes a law. And then and the collective group have said if I cross it, I'm going to go to jail, which is what law is. The law in a country is basically a couple of people coming to you and say, look, this is it. You cross the red light, you go to jail. Like, well, but it's an empty road. I don't see why I have to stay here. There's nothing, no one coming from any direction. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired. I want to go home. I should be able to cross this red light. But the collective group said, no, if you do that, you go to jail. So you can still disagree and do what you want, but there can be consequences. So first of all, you have to know, is it a human who's drawing the line, or is it a God that's drawing the line? It makes a big difference between the two. Multiple sources drawing it, so you have chaos, or is it one source that's drawing the line? Knowledge level. The one who's drawing this line, did that one know what I'm going to go through right now? Right? Like when your parents draw lines for you, what is your really good argument? It's like, your time, right, is different than our time. Your experience, this is like the easiest and this is the best. Well, this works so well. I'm teaching you how to argue with your parents. So you listen carefully. You should be very, very attentive to this. Because you're going to say, well, your time and your experience is different than mine. And when you drew this line, are you telling me that you're omniscient, that you have all knowledge, that you knew exactly what I was going to go through 14, 15 years into the future? Impossible. You're just a person. You maybe had a few assumptions, a few hunches, a few thoughts, but you couldn't have thought of every single scenario that was going to happen to me. So this line needs to be revisited again. Unless the one who drew the line is omniscient. Unless the one who drew the line knows all. So you can't say, oh, my situation today, our life today, as in it was haram back then. But today, I mean, who could have thought this is even possible? Not a human, but you think God could? Understand where I'm going with this? So who drew the line? Is it God? Okay, then I have to respect that. Okay. Because it's not a human. It's not just a person like me that I can argue and say, you're just like me, you're just flesh and blood. I don't like what you did, and we can have that kind of equilibrium. There's equality, and I can argue with you, I can debate with you. But I can't debate God. It has to be one source. It can't be multiple sources to begin with, because multiple sources is useless. You just have all these lines. There's no pattern, there's no real meaning to it. And the God that I'm going to listen to, the line that he drew, must be omniscient, because if the God who drew this doesn't know everything that's going to be happening, then he has to keep on redrawing those lines. Every once in a while, there's Islam 203, Islam version 3.5. Like it has to be updated because he didn't know what was going to happen next. Jalla Jalaluhu does. So that's why when he said this is haram, khamr is haram, and recreational intoxication is haram. Period. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter when. Doesn't matter where. Because he knew, subhanahu wa ta'ala, so when he made that line, he was very much aware of the story of Adnan and Ali and Khalid and Samira and Safiya and Maryam. He knew exactly what was going to happen to them, so we can't say, well, you didn't know what was going to happen to me. No, I did. Wisdom level. The one who's drawing the line, do they actually know what's best for us? Like your parents, they draw lines, they think they know what's best for you, which is another argument you can have with your parents. I mean, who said that I want to do this? You can say, your parents are like, I'm doing this for your best so that you can achieve 1, 2, 3. Like, who said I wanted 1, 2, 3? Who said I even wanted that? And then, of course, things turn really ugly. But that's when you have that, because you're basically challenging the wisdom. Do you know what's even best for me? You don't know what's best for me. So when you drew this line, you just based it on your personal experience. You didn't even take into consideration my own, unless the one who actually drew the line is the all-wise, right? Has full hikmah. So he knows exactly. There's nothing that he doesn't know, and he knows exactly what's best for you. Understanding? So who drew the line for us as Muslims is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is not human, who is way beyond that, who is not multiple, so he's one source, so the line is just one line for everything. There's not multiple lines, there's no confusion. The knowledge level is ultimate, and the wisdom level is ultimate. So I can respect that line, because this line here is no longer something I can push forward a little bit, because this line was put by God, by the one who knows all, the one who knows what's best for me, and it's one-time thing. It was not updated. But if it was put by Khalid, I'll be kicking that line down the curb as hard as I can. And he can push as much as what he wants back, but I'll keep on trying to push it down because I'm challenging his knowledge. I'm challenging his wisdom. I'm challenging His authority. I'm challenging everything because honestly, there's really no, why not? Why wouldn't I? At the end, we're just human. We're both human. We're equal on the basic level. Okay, so that's the first question. Am I making sense to you so far? This is important that you take some time and contemplate these things because they will make a difference for you. So why were the lines drawn? The second question, why? Okay, I accept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim, al-hakim, al-wahid, al-ahad. He drew that line. Why? Why do you draw the line to begin with? What was the point of the line? Why do I need a line? Why can't you just erase the lines? I want to walk around and do whatever I want. So is it to restrict? That's what we think. That's what children don't like. They think their parents drew the lines to restrict them or to control them. And that's where the rebellious piece comes out. That's where in your teens you start rebelling against everything because your thought process, unfortunately, is that your parents drew these lines for you because they want to restrict you and control you. Good parents don't do it for that reason. They don't do it for that reason. Well, maybe a little bit, but not for the majority of the cases. Honestly, for the majority of the cases, they're not doing it for that. They're doing it for a different reason. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is important. When he drew, because we're talking about our experience as Muslims, he drew that line. Is it for no unknown reasons? Just because he feels like it? Even if he did, he would still have to adhere. But is that why? Does he want to restrict us? Does he want to control us? Or is it to achieve ease and success? No, I think you kind of know the answer for that one. But let me convince you a little bit more. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, سَنُقْرِئُكَ فَلَا تَنْسَ إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ إِنَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْجَهْرَ وَمَا يَخْفَى وَنُيَسِّرُكَ لِلْيُسْرَى. Then he says again in Surah Al-Layl, وَصَدَّقْ فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. We're going to ease you into the ultimate ease. When he talks about Islam, the way of life, not Islam as an abstract thought or a bunch of rules, but as a way of life, when you take everything in it and you live it, he calls that al-yusra, the ultimate ease. He calls that the ultimate ease. That's what he calls it. Do you feel it to be the ultimate ease? If you don't, then there's something missing. That's how he sees it. This is the ultimate way of ease. This is the easiest thing possible. I've designed for you this way of life so that you will find ease all through and through. He actually says this in Surah Al-Layl. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمْ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. In case it's not, Allah wants for you, He wills for you ease. He does not want or will for you difficulty. Like He does not want it to be hard. He wants it to be easy. Why all these lines? Yeah, exactly. Why all these lines? That's why these lines are there. That's why they're there. It's like we make assumptions and we draw conclusions without actually understanding, well, why all these lines? Yeah, Habibi, those lines are there so that you can achieve that, so they can actually find the ease. You won't, it's not easier. Obviously, my 1.5-year-old, what's easier for them is once I open the cookie jar, that they eat all of the cookies. That's what he wants. That's ease for him. But if I have any brain in my head, if what I carry on my shoulder is not a batikha, then I'm not going to give him more than half a cookie, or maybe because I want to restrict him, control him for unknown reasons, just because I feel like it, or because I want to make sure he grows up healthy and doesn't have diarrhea and scream and be in pain all night. It's because I want ease for him. So this line that I just drew, the line of only 1 cookie a day, is not because it's because I want ease for them. We all know that in life, like a study. You're going to study. You're going to learn whether you like it or not. You're going to learn. Why? Because your dad doesn't like it, hates you? Because he knows that if you grow up ignorant, then your life is going to be a series of difficulties. Just one difficulty after the other. But if you do learn, then yes, right now your life will suck for a while. It'll be very difficult. There'll be exams. There'll be a lot of... But then you will find meaning and you'll be fulfilled. And that knowledge will shine through you. And you have something to practice in life and it'll take you places. So yes, it's for ease. Just maybe not immediately now. Maybe not at this moment. But it's going to give you ease a little bit as we move along. So it's for ease and success, all rulings and laws of Islam. Can you memorize this? Just take this away for today. Wallahi, just make my life easier. Every law and ruling in Islam serves the purpose of making our lives easier and to grant us success in this world and the hereafter. Every law, every single thing you were told that's haram and halal is there for our benefit. Even the parts and the ones that we don't enjoy or we find difficult. The ones that you find difficult are there to help you achieve that ease and success if practiced appropriately and properly, obviously. Everything that is haram that you wish wasn't. Everything that is fard that you wish wasn't. It's there for us. It's not for him. What does Allah get out of any of this? How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefiting? If I don't drink and and go permit zina? How does Allah benefit if you cover your head and you dress appropriately? No, but the system is there so that we achieve ease and success. This is the system that allows you to achieve that. That's why He has those rulings. Those lines aren't there to make you miserable. مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لِتَشْقَى. We didn't send you the Quran so you can be upset and unhappy and miserable for the rest of your days. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. I just need you to understand that, because a lot of people come with that and say, why is Allah doing this? Why do you think? Think about it. If you understand Allah, why do you think? Just for the fun of it? Hey, what the heck? Let them all wear scarves and see how that works. No, this is a way of life that will allow the societal system, the social contract to actually function. It'll make sure that things work, that men and women actually behave appropriately, and they all find meaning and fulfillment within their relationships, and communities can grow and prosper. We can have. That's why it's not because of just a. Again, it comes back to the beginning. You can come and argue with me for hours about hijab and stuff, or we can go back to the origin. Do you believe in La ilaha illallah? Do you believe in the one who drew the lines? Read the book and see what lines he drew, and then know that he did it for your own benefit. And then, once you have that certainty and clarity, you can start looking, actually, what is the benefit? And you'll find it. You'll find endless bouts of benefit for everything that He told us to do, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to do. So the choice becomes extremely simple. Here's the simplicity of the choice if it hasn't come to you yet. There are two ways of living life. Either a way, this is what he's saying. This is what he's saying, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not what I'm saying. What he's saying is, there's two ways of living life. Either a way that I have told you to live, which is ease in dunya, that will lead to ease in akhirah, or a life where it's difficult in dunya, that will lead to a difficult akhirah. It's a no-brainer choice, right? The choice becomes extremely easy. Of course, I'm going to go here. If it was the opposite, then, it's kind of if it's like hard here, easy there, or easy here and hard there. Like, I like my pay up front. I'll go with the easy here, hard there, please. And then but it's not like that. It's not. If it were, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have made it that way and said, it's easy here, hard here, easy there. And you would still have to choose the easy there. But He didn't do it that way. He actually made sure it was easy, or hard. Up to you. It's up to you. You're telling me that not being able to follow my whims and desires of sex and drugs and leisure and pleasure is ease? Where's the ease in that? Yeah, it's ease. Sorry you can't see it. But you know what? When you were 5 years old and your father didn't let you do whatever you want, it was ease too. And when you were a younger teenager and your parents protected you from certain choices you're going to make, it was ease as well. So if you were wrong then 15 times, at least, is there any possibility that you're wrong now too? That maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just the same way, is just protecting you from that which is going to harm you? And if you still don't believe me, have you ever maybe taken a look at people who live that way? And how it all ends? And what happens later? And how they feel in the midst of it? It's not that hard, obviously. Honestly, it's not that hard. It's not that hard to take testimonies of people who have done everything. Even things they can't even admit publicly because they can go to jail. And still, they're just as empty. They're just as hungry. They're just as unfulfilled. And others who have done none of that are much more functional and they find much more meaning in life. Because He made it very simple, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no, how does this, the final question, then I'll explain how this all kind of works in terms of Tawheed. Who can give exceptions? That's the third thing you have to ask about rules, or what lines. So this line here, who put it, we discussed who put it, why, we discussed why. Pretty good so far. But who gives exceptions to these? If I need to cross the line, I'm in a position where I need to cross. Is there an exception that can be given? Can someone give me an exception? Someone can give me an exception? So exceptions are doorways to corruption, right? Exceptions are always doorways to corruption. Who can give an exception to a line in our deen, based on what I explained to you? The one who put it. Whoever drew the line is the one who can give an exception to it. So if he puts the line, and he adds an exception to it, which he does, right, there's darurat to be halal. You can't eat khanzir or drink wine. But then if you're literally dying of starvation and thirst, and that's all that's there, it's bacon and wine it is, until you can find something else. So the line is there, but whoever put the line made sure that he explained when you have an exception to crossing that line at certain moments. But if that's not the case, let's take other people's line. If the line is drawn by a human being, well then the human being can offer exceptions. Or if we grant some other being the ability to give exceptions, then multiple sources corrupt both those who practice the law and the clergymen who grant exceptions. When you have a lot of sources of lines, like if I have one line, but it has like 5 sources, and I need an exception, I can go to the first source. Can I get an exception? No. Okay. You. What about, can I get it? Yeah, no. Oh, I can't. Oh, good. So I have an exception now. Because I have a couple of sources who can actually grant me an exception to this line. And then the clergy got into the business of offering exceptions. And that's how they make money. That's how they become rich. And that's how they control people's behavior. That's how they control how an ummah works. And that's what the Quran says. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن كثيرا من الأحبار والرهبان لا يأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل ويصدون عن سبيل الله. A lot of the scholars and the clergy in the past, they would take people's wealth and they would push people away from the way of Allah because they would grant exceptions and grant just whatever. Yeah, you can do it, no problem. I expect a nice donation for the place at the end of the month. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم. This is more clear. أربابا من دون الله. They took their scholars and their clergy as gods aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْمَسِيحَ ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. How? Is because if someone can give you an exception, can gray out that red line for a while, that person has the power of God in their hands. Right? If I have the ability to say, oh, you don't have to be honest now, and I gray out that red line, that's a lot of power. If I can say, yeah, it's okay, you can behave this way today. And I'm literally graying out a line that was drawn by God himself. Understanding the problem here, this is very scary, this is very, very serious issues. So Tawheed comes down to one thing. This is why Tawheed is important. This whole introduction, maybe 30 minutes of me just blabbering away, going through different ideas and scenarios, is just so that you can understand this next sentence. This is what it all comes down to. Honestly, if I didn't go through all that and just told you this, it would be the same conclusion. It comes down to this. Your source of values and ethics is one. Go back a little bit. It's your source of values and ethics. Where do your values and ethics come from? Tawheed means that the source of your values and ethics is one. One. Only one tells you what your values and ethics are. One. No one else is involved. There's nothing else. It's not a committee, it's not an institution, it's not faculty, it's one. That's what Tawheed means. You take your values, your principles, and your ethics from one. And that's it. No one else is involved. When I come and speak to you about Islam, I'm trying to explain to you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So I'm trying to speak on His behalf. I am not in any way capable of changing anything He explained, or offering any exceptions, or corrupting any of His teachings. If I do that, then that's the biggest musibah ever. That means you need to get rid of me ASAP. It's a problem, because Tawheed means that your source of ethics and values is one. Imagine that with me for a moment. If you have a constant source of ethics and values, meaning it's the same, it doesn't change. Again, human beings change. Today the line is here, tomorrow the line may be over here. That's why if you look at how communities and societies work, in 100 years, the line that was here is now way over there. And all the things that were haram before are no longer haram anymore. And probably the opposite exists as well in other fields or disciplines of life, right? Because human beings change, and if they're changing, then the line will change. If you have constant source of ethics and values, then you'll have constant values, and then you'll have constant ethics and behaviors. And if you have variable or multiple sources, you'll have variable values and variable ethics and behaviors. It's as simple as that. That's what Tawheed is. Meaning, as a Muslim, I can pick you up and drop you anywhere, anytime. And qatl will be haram, and zina is haram, and khamr is haram, and gossip is haram, and qadhf is haram, and salah is wajib, and zakah is wajib. And you have to be honest, and you have to be trustworthy, and you have to be ghudd al-basar, and you have to dress in a certain way and speak in a certain way. It won't change. Pick you up again, drop you 500 years, 5,000 years in the future. Same thing. That line ain't budging. That's where it's always been. That's what Tawheed is. Tawheed means that line doesn't go anywhere. That's what it means. That's what it's supposed to be for me and you. That you and I adhere to these lines. We don't need anyone watching over us. We don't need a law that dictates it. Because we are muwahhid. Because I say, La ilaha illallah. I see what lines He drew, and I'll never, ever cross any of those lines. Period. And that's what Tawheed is. And that's what value is supposed to have for us. So muwahid and a society that has Tawheed, a society that's values don't shift over time. They stay the same. They stay the same. And if you think about it as Muslims, that's pretty, in the collective sense of it, that's pretty much there still. The beliefs that Muslims have had in terms of their ethics and values are pretty much the same since the Prophet ﷺ passed away. The behaviors differ a little bit because some muwahideen, they look for people to offer them those exceptions. They look for maybe someone can give them a little bit of a different, because they want a way out. They don't want to have to adhere to that ethic for the rest of their lives. That's why as Muslims we have a problem with some of the teachings or some of the policies or ways of thought that exist in the country today. We have a problem with it because what people are doing, how we're viewing, how sexes are viewing themselves and each other's, and how we're defining what relationships are acceptable and aren't, it's evolving, it's changing all the time. What wasn't acceptable 70 years ago is now not only acceptable, it's encouraged for God's sake. It's actually, and as Muslims, no, this has never changed. Qawm Lut has always been very clear for us. This is haram, it's always been, always will be, it's not going to change. You're going to come and try and change it. You can try. It's not going to go anywhere. If you're muwahid, that line will always be there. You can try and erase it and rub it out as much as you want. It just gets shinier. The more you try, it's going to shine. Nothing's going to change. If you're muwahid, that line will be very clear to you. And that's why as a muwahid, wherever I put you, whenever I meet you, whatever situation you're in, you're going to be the same. Do you steal? No. I don't, because that's one of my values. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala drew it there. What if you're hungry? No. What if you're really hungry? No. What if you're really, really hungry? No. It's not going to change. This line doesn't change. It doesn't move. But if you're not muwahid, then maybe at some point you will. Right? Because that line wasn't clear to you. You don't understand it that way. And you're understanding how important this is? This is why Tawheed is the most important thing of all. Because if you have Tawheed, these lines are right there. You know exactly what path you're walking. You know what to avoid. It's clear. And if you don't have that there, then you can do anything. You can do anything. Before we move forward, you see this? This is my disclaimer. This is very important. Very important. Rulings, laws, jurisprudent practices, they don't equal ethics and values and principles. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. Whether you can touch a dog's coat or body or not is not an issue of ethics and values and principles. It's not an ethic. It's not a value. That's an issue of fiqh. Fiqh is not something that's... Actually, fiqh, if you understand Islam, is designed to evolve. It's designed that way. Like the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed Islam from a jurisprudent perspective is designed for there always to be ways to go back and analyze the evidence. Study the evidence again. Find ways to process it. See what is in stone, what isn't. That's why you can have different opinions. That one madhab will say this and another madhab will say that. This is not exceptions. There's not someone granting you an exception to a rule or exception to a line. That's not this. Because we're talking about values and ethics and principles. We're not talking about your issues of fiqh. Please see the difference between the two. A lot of people don't. Actually, a lot of the problems we have in our society comes from people who don't understand this little thing here. They'll take an issue of fiqh and they'll say, this is an Islamic value. It's not an Islamic value. Who told you Islamic value? Who said haircuts are Islamic values? They're not. Haircuts at best are like a tertiary fiqh issue. At best. If I really want to push it, it's not an ethic or a value or a principle. Nothing about hair has anything to do with ethics or values or principles in general. They're issues of fiqh. You'll find scholars who have looked at the evidence in one way and understand it in a different way. That's fine. I'm not trying to open the door for you to do whatever you want. You still have to go and seek knowledge and process evidence and ask those who know what they're talking about. But I do need you to differentiate between what is an ethic, a value, a principle. The lines are there to protect them so that they don't get lost. And then issues of fiqh and laws and rulings, that's different. It's very different in Islam. They're very different things. So Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, the oneness of the source of values and ethics means people have a set of values that do not change and cannot be corrupted. That's what Tawheed means. Tawheed gives people the only chance they have as societies to uphold any form of high value. It gives them the only chance that exists in the world of a society upholding high values is they have Tawheed. Without Tawheed, it's not going to happen. Look at the world around you. Look at the world around you. Look what's happening. Look at how people are behaving. Look at the shift, the constant shifting of morals that we are seeing around us every day. Muslims are struggling in this ocean that is just, the waves are as high, these two tsunamis that are just shifting everything. We're trying to keep our eyes set on where that line is and not allow the tide to pull us one way or the other. And if we get pulled quickly over a line, we run back and say, no, that was a mistake. This line is not to be crossed. It's hard, it's not easy. This is a difficult thing. But if you're a muwahhid and you believe if you're true Tawheed, then you'll always remind yourself of what is and what isn't, what is possible and what is not. I'm going to give you an example. So this is what I mean by values. We don't lie. We don't lie. He did give, subhanahu wa ta'ala, himself some exceptions to that line. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave exceptions to it. In war, if you're caught, don't spill your guts and tell them everything that your that your army is going to do. When you're trying to do a sulh between two people, you can exaggerate. Oh, they want to get back with you. Sometimes the egos are just too big, so they don't want to be the person who's in dispute. They don't want to be the person who kind of swallowed their ego and fix the problem. So you tell them the other one wanted, and then you tell that other one that the other one wanted, and then they'll think the other person swallowed their ego. They'll get together. They'll figure out that no one swallowed the ego, but it doesn't matter. At that point, they're already on good terms, so you've already fixed the problem. So it's really not lying. When it comes to spouses, you can tell your husband he's amazing. You can tell your wife she's the prettiest thing you've ever seen. You can say that stuff because it's really just, it's there, it's kindness, and it's within. So there's certain exceptions to these lines. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put. I didn't make them up. I can't just do that myself. Otherwise, we don't lie. We tell the truth. Even if that means I have to testify against my own mother. Even if that means I have to tell a lie, tell the truth, and it's going to cost me my job, or cost me my career, or cost me a semester, or cost me money, or cost me my public image. It doesn't matter. Lying is not an option. It never was. If you're muwahhid, it's not an option. Outside from the 3 exceptions that you know about, outside from when you're being coerced or trying to be killed by someone, so they ask you to say, you can go ahead and say something that gets you. Outside from that, you're not allowed to lie. But then, so your Tawheed is going to be challenged. Allah will challenge your Tawheed. He'll put you in a position where, okay, let's see. Are you going to be honest now? It's easy to be honest when everything is going, hunky-dory. But when it's hard, can you be honest then? Or at that point, you're going to be like, Sheikh, that's when I get the call. Sheikh, no, you can't lie. But I know, don't tell me what you're going to lose. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're going to lose all that. I really am. So sorry. I can't say, I hope that if I was in your position that I do the right thing, but I can't tell you, go ahead and, no, I can't. Based on what? You want me to move the line for you? I can't. You call me about a fatwa, fiqh, yeah, I can give you the different opinions of the scholars on the issue. But you're asking about an ethic, about a value, about a principle? No. Don't ask. You know it's right. If you have true tawheed, you know exactly what you need to do. Oops, let's go back to there. We don't steal, we don't inflict harm, we don't oppress us or oppressors, we don't fornicate, we don't intoxicate ourselves relationally, we don't cheat or betray. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And with the values that we have as Muslims, the principles and the ethics that we carry. Those are the lines. Those lines have to be adhered to. Don't mix up those lines with the issues of fiqh that have different opinions here and there that you can actually go ahead and study the evidence and choose what works for you, what makes sense to you. I'm talking about the basic stuff, the big stuff. Yeah, so it's not. So you have to, again, how do you find that out? You just go back to how the Quran words things. So when the Quran talks about khamr, for example, it says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ, right? قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. So when he talked about khamr the first time, it's like, people ask you about khamr and gambling, and you can tell them that there's a lot of harm in it, and sometimes people will find some benefit. Meaning if 50 people are gambling, 49 will lose and one person will make. So that one person benefited, but the rest all didn't. And then in drinking, same thing. Most of the time there's harm. There's not one time where you may find some benefit. And obviously in alcohol, right, there's a lot of harm, but then we figured out a way to actually take the ethanol and use it for surgeries and use it for people who need to go under anesthesia. So we actually found a usage for intoxication that was beneficial. So it's a concept. It's a value before it being an actual issue of fiqh. It's not about, that's why, so you have to, so how do you learn this stuff? You have to sit down and listen and learn about Islam. Learn how did Islam talk about certain things and how it talked about other things, for example. And then you can differentiate between what is an ethic and a value and what is a, fiqh. And that's actually something that takes some time. But what's important for me today is that if you understand why Tawheed is the most important thing, you start thinking down those lines, you'll arrive at the conclusions eventually. Like you'll arrive at a point where you understand exactly what the ethics and values are versus what the issues of fiqh are. If you understand what I explained, if you're going to take it seriously and actually walk down that road. But that's a good question. So the last piece of this lecture, and I'll go this quickly, inshallah, because really what I wanted you to learn, you've learned. How do we answer the question, where do others go on the Day of Judgment? Because that's an issue. It's kind of attached to the concept of Tawheed, because when you talk about Tawheed, well, there's a lot of people who aren't muwahhideen around the world, right? Where do they go? Because Allah doesn't forgive shirk, and there's a lot of mushrikeen around the world, so where do they go? Because people get a little bit concerned. There's like a couple of billion people who are mushrikeen. So where do they go on the Day of Judgment? So what's the answer to that? What's the answer? Do we answer it? We don't answer the question. Do we answer that question? How do we answer? We don't. We don't answer. Who am I to answer that question? Do you understand the level of arrogance that would take for me to answer that question? To tell you where people are going? Tell you where people are. I don't even know where I am going. How do I talk about where other people are going? It's insane. The Quran is not a catalog to say, where are you from? Let me hear him. Okay, so based on this, you're like the 7th level of Jahannam. Based on what? Based on what? I can only tell you what Allah has warned from and what Allah has encouraged to do. What Allah is saying. He's saying, if you do this, this is what happens. I don't tell a mushrik you're going to Jahannam. I say, this is what Allah said. He said that He will not forgive shirk, and shirk will lead to Jahannam. That doesn't mean that he is going to Jahannam. It's different. It's different. The concept, that linear logic that we use is not usable when we talk about God's destiny. It's not usable. I can't say, everyone, mushrikeen go to Jahannam. Fulan is mushrik. Therefore, no, that doesn't work. That logic that we use, that Aristotle logic, that simple logic, not applicable here. That's not the point of the Quran. That's not what it's here for. So I can't say in Nasara are all in Jannah. No. That wording is not even in the Quran. It's not there. Actually, the Quran says something different. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا, right? وَالصَّابِئِينَ وَالنَّصَارَى وَالْمَجُوسَ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَفْصِلُ بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Other verses, الَّذِينَ آمَنوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالصَّابِئُونَ وَالنَّصَارَى مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about punishment, He talks about shirk and mushrikeen. He doesn't actually point out faiths. He does not point out faiths. إن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب المشركين في نار جهنم. كفروا. That's the problem. It's not. I don't go and talk about this whole group here is going somewhere and this whole group is going somewhere else. That's not what this is for. And we don't do that. Why? Well, it's a part of our worldview. This is important. Now, this actually makes a difference. People struggle with this because it's an important part of our worldview. We're not supposed to look at people as they're all going to Jahannam. We shouldn't be thinking that. But we should be understanding that because they don't have guidance, then based on this book, there's a high likelihood that they will. So we have to bring them this warning. We have to teach and explain. But where they go once they die is none of my business. And I have no information about that. I can't share anything. I don't know. Outside from the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed out are in Jahannam, I don't know anything. Like outside from Fir'aun and Iblis and Qarun, a couple of people in the Quran and a few people the Prophet ﷺ pointed out, I know nothing. You could give me the worst dictator that ever lived, and I cannot stand here with full confidence and tell you this person, I can't. And if I do, again, that's a level of arrogance and vanity that I'm not willing to, based on what? I am not a judge. He didn't ask me to help him in judging people. I was not given that status, and I'm not going to be involved in the judging process yawm al-qiyamah. It's none of my business. I have no access to any of that information. It's not my thing. We're way too open on that as Muslims right now. I don't like it. It bothers me. Be very careful. We're way too, we have jur'ah, the audacity. Yeah, fulan is in ila jahannam wa bi'sal masir once they die. What? No. I don't care what they've done. Believe me, I have people who I make dua that they go to Jahannam. I make dua, inshallah, I don't want them to, Musa may, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ أَتَيْتَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَمَلَأَهُ زِينَةً فِي أَمْوَالٍ فِي الْحَيَاةِ رَبَّنَا اطْمِسْ عَلَى أَمْوَالِهِمْ وَاشْدُدْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ فَلَا يُؤْمِنُوا. Musa at the end made dua that, Ya Rabb, Fir'aun never believes. I don't want to see Fir'aun a believer one day. Ya Rabb, may he be punished for what he's doing. He made that dua against Fir'aun. You can make that dua. If someone has oppressed you that bad, you can go ahead and do that. But I can never say that they're going there. No, based on what? Based on what? There's none of my business. What Allah does with people on the Day of Judgment is His business alone. He will convey this message and the warnings. What he does is completely up to him. How dare anybody tell God what he can and cannot do and what he should or shouldn't do? That is not acceptable at all. Again, the one who put the line is not a human being for us to argue with. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. It's very important. A few points here. Forgiving after promising not to do so is a virtue. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm going to punish you, and then he doesn't, that's a virtue. That's a virtue. But if he promises you good and doesn't deliver, that's a problem. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises punishment and then doesn't, that's a virtue. He can do whatever he wants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can do whatever he wants. It's an important piece to kind of keep in mind. That doesn't mean, again, you say, well, a sheikh saying that disbelievers are going to Jannah. Really? This is what I got once from these. I'm telling you very clearly, I have no business, I have no ability to tell you where anyone's going at all. Not one person, aside from the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran are in Jannah. And besides the one the Prophet said they were in Jannah, and vice versa, and the opposite. Otherwise, I don't have any, how do I know? I don't know. I can warn, I can say, look, the book is saying if you believe in amila salihan, you'll go to Jannah. And if you do shirk, you go to nar. And if you kill, you go to nar. But that doesn't mean that fulan who did these things is going to nar or to Jannah. It's a different, completely different story. Or else there wouldn't be individual judgment Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? Every individual will be judged alone and differently based on the variables of their lives. Or else it would just be a group judgment. All right, it's like a bingo card. All right, you killed, all right, over there. Just go on yourself. You still, no, it would be that way. If it was that simple, then we all just have go through a checklist, and if you've made any of these problem mistakes, just by yourself. Don't even, just keep on going. Jahannam is not too, you can't miss it. It's the big fire thing, just go there. But no, you're going to go stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're going to have to argue your case on your own. No one's there, not your family, not your spouse, not your children. You have to stand alone. And he's going to explain, you're going to go through your life, the specifics of your life, of your experience. The hand you were dealt, let's see what you did with it. And then he'll give you his judgment alone. It'll be specific to you. Yes, he gave the guidelines in the book, and he'll hold you to it, but it's individual. It's individualized for a reason. It's individualized for a reason. The one is not a catalog for people's destinations on the Day of Judgment, but for our own use. Yes? So again, a shortcoming, if someone promises you to give you something and they don't give it, that's a shortcoming. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises Jannah and doesn't deliver for those who deserve it, that's a shortcoming. But if he promises punishment to someone and he doesn't punish them and he forgives them, that's not a shortcoming, that's a virtue. It's just a concept that you keep in mind. Do not worry about where people are going Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's problematic. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're more just than Allah? You're more fair than Allah? You're more compassionate than Allah? No. And maybe that's a little bit of I want to fix the world, but my house is a mess type of thing. And I have very little sympathy for that way of thought. Those who want to change the world, but you look at their own lives and their homes and their relationships and their families, it's a complete mess. But they don't want to deal with that stuff, so they distract themselves by saying, oh, I want to fix the environment, I want to remove oppression. That's great. But what about your nucleus? What about your own existence? Not taken care of? No. What are you doing then? What are you doing? Take care of that first and then start talking about changing the world. So those are like, oh, but what about people? I don't want. How can people go to Jahannam? Look, where are you going? That's the only question you're going to be asked Yawm al-Qiyamah. That's what you're responsible for. Make sure you figure out where you're going. Take care of that. And then if you take care of that, you want to help others, go ahead. But worrying about it is very arrogant. It's very vain. And it says that you don't seem to understand who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to begin with. Categories of people in this life is different than the categories of people in the hereafter. In this dunya, there's mu'min and there's kafir. That's it. That's what we have. We have Muslim, we have kafir. On the Day of Judgment, no. There's like a lot more categories. There are people who were given the da'wah in the wrong way. There are people who weren't Muslim in dunya, they were kafir, but they were offered the da'wah in a horrific way. No one would have ever accepted the da'wah the way it was offered to them. They're Ahl Fitra. There are people who are between prophecies, who were not offered the message at all. There are people who are Muslim, who are ahbar and ruhban, but they were corrupt. In dunya, they were up here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're up there, they're seen as scholars, but on the Day of Judgment, they're not doing well. They're not doing well at all. So the categories on the Day of Judgment is very different than the categories in dunya. And because we don't know that, then we cannot make judgment. We just take people at face value. We perform da'wah. We spread. We try to get people to this way. We try to save people as much as possible. And we leave Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to do. It's none of my business. I don't have time for this one. What is the point of all this? I'll just go. There's two ways to lose Yawm al-Qiyamah. There's two ways. There's two ways to lose. There's one way is come with no Tawheed, right? He explained that. In Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi. Come, you don't have Tawheed. That's a big problem. We all agree to that. Someone comes kafir Yawm al-Qiyamah, they could have done anything. You're like, yep, that person's not going to make it. Yeah, give us a minute, yeah. And then the second way to lose is this hadith here. And the concepts that come around it. إن المفلس من أمتي يوم القيامة من يأتي بصلاة وصيام وصدقة وزكاة وحج ويأتي وقد ضرب هذا وشتم هذا وأكل مال هذا وسفك دم هذا وهتك عرض هذا. Someone comes يوم القيامة and they're not only muwahid, they perform salah, صدقة, صيام, and zakah, and hajj, but they come and they've cursed this person, they've taken the wealth of this person, they have spilled the blood of that person, they betrayed that person, and then they lose all of their hasanat, and they still owe people, so the people that they owe, they don't have hasanat to give them, so they give them sayyat instead of it, ثم يلقى في النار. And then they're thrown into Jahannam. There's more than one way to lose Yawm al-Qiyamah. So shirk is one thing, and then bankruptcy is what I called it, is the second way to do it. So you come with shirk, that's not forgivable. No, he forgives it, that's a different story, but you can't come bargaining on that. He told you, I'm not forgiving this, so don't do it. Come with Tawheed. Now whatever he does, Yawm al-Qiyamah is not my business, but that's what he's saying. The other way to lose is bankruptcy, where you came with Tawheed, but those lines didn't mean anything to you. You just said La ilaha illallah, but you crossed every line. Oh, I can't kill? Well, here you go. I can't steal? Well, here I go. But what about the Tawheed? What about those lines you were supposed to, the source of your ethics and your values and your principles? If you didn't adhere to it, then it's not going to mean anything. Yes, you said La ilaha illallah, but you didn't adhere to the actual lines. You say Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'in, which is another way of saying La ilaha illallah. It's you and only you whom I serve, it's you and only you whom I seek aid from. You know what Allah says to you? He said, that's between us. هذا بيني وبين عبدي. We'll see. That's between us. We'll see. Go ahead, live. We'll see. Really? No, you seek aid from no one but me and you worship no one but me? All right, we'll see. Live. Let's see. Let's see if that's true. Let's see if that's true, because you have to prove it. You have to prove those lines. Those lines were real. So there's no time for that group discussion. We'll end with that, inshallah ta'ala. But I hope the concept of Tawheed now is clear to you. And I hope that you have an appreciation of it that is a bit more profound than it was before, and that you continue to carry it for the rest of your life, because this is why we're muwahideen. And this is why Tawheed is the most important thing. And this is why we don't fall into shirk. It's because it has practical applications for us in our own lives. And I want you to take time to think about that. I'll end with that. We'll see you inshallah next week. Subhanallah bihamdihi la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah someone can make a adhan for us and then make a qama.